Moving on to our third letter of our grapes, we started off with geography and religion, and now we are moving on to S, social structures. So we're going to be talking about ancient Greece and some of their social customs. So let's get started. The word that you see a lot in ancient Greece is the word oikos. Oikos is actually the origin of our modern word economics. You can kind of hear it there, and that's the Greek word for household or family. So hence the name oikos, sweet oikos that I have right up there. So when we look at the oikos, Greek society is based around the family, and that's going to come into play here in a little bit. Now, a big idea that you read about in the textbook is the concept of arete, which is excellence. In ancient Greece, excellence was a value that they just loved. You had to be excellent. If you were an athlete, you had to be the best athlete. If you were a thinker, you had to be the best thinker. We saw that a lot in the Olympics. It's actually a value, a custom that's kind of translated down Western society and even follows us today as well, that you have to be excellent, you have to be good at what you do. Now, looking into the family life here, infant choice. What I mean by this is girls were not preferred in ancient Greece. And if it ultimately came down to it, a female baby would be left to die, would be exposed. The decision was left to the father. Males were preferred over females for several reasons. Reason one, the family line went through the male. The second reason, the labor of a male was valuable to the family. The males could take care of aging parents. For an Athenian male, entry into the populace basically came through the dad. And if the dad said he was your father, you got to go and vote. Their life. The average age that somebody died that was a woman was 36 years old. You got to think back then. The methods of birth are very crude, and birth control as well. And men was about 45. Only half of children survived infancy. The concept of a blended family we also have as well. Women might have been widowed by war. Men lost a lot of their wives during childbirth. If you're a man and you don't have if you don't have a son, you might adopt a son. Widows might divorce, get remarried, something along those lines. In addition, in most of Greece, we'll talk about Sparta in a little bit, but the genders were very, very separated. What I mean is women did one thing and had a very specific role, and men did something else. If you go into a household, there's literally the women's quarters where the women hang out. What do the women do? They're not to be seen. They don't go out by themselves. If you go out in public, you essentially have to be escorted by a male, like your husband, your father, even your son. If you're a woman, you might make clothes, oversee slaves, clean the home, tend to the sick, take care of the kids. Even men tended to purchase groceries. Women couldn't really inherit property, anything like that. All the business of the household was conducted by a father or a husband. And if somebody went and divorced, the children would go to the dad. The women did not sleep. They basically slept with other women. They didn't even sleep with their husbands. They're rarely mentioned by name. On average, a woman bore 4.3 children, and only 2.7 survive infancy. Obviously, you can't have 0.7 of a child, but that's just an average. Like I said, childbirth would take place at home. A lot of women would die from that. Abortion was also common, which could lead to death of the woman as well. Marriage. On average, the girl tended to be about 15, and the guy tended to be about 30, so about double the age. Kind of gross. And at the age of 5, usually the father would go arrange for his daughter's marriage, and the daughter would be given, in a sense, to her future husband. A man would eventually get a dowry, and basically what the man is going to do is pledge to take care of the daughter of the man. We saw relatives getting married. We saw that Antigone between Antigone and Haman, like first cousins. Men would go and have one spouse at a time, but it's also very common to cheat on your spouse as well. Now, for women, there was I don't want to say a better route, because it really wasn't a better route, but the heterai. They were basically, quote-unquote, female companions. Sometimes they were foreigners, former slaves, abandoned girls that had been orphaned. They have more freedom. They can travel around the streets. But they basically are entertainers at the party. There is an element of prostitution involved. but they're kind of they're going to go and intermix with the men. They may provide poetry, they may sing, they may play an instrument, and they may dance, something like that. So they're somewhat educated and can be very educated. It kind of depends. Now, this is where we have to get the maturity level up a bit, which I talked about in class. The concept of prostitution. Prostitution was rampant. They had what we would call like a red light district in a lot of the towns, in the polises, in the city-states, and the men would go to these quite frequently. The concept of like cheating on your wife and it being morally wrong, we don't see that much. It's kind of a different, it's obviously a different society. They have different values, which we'll be talking here about a bit today. Everybody could go to the brothel, different prices, different ages, all that stuff. Some of the prostitutes are known for basically having mulberry juice around their lips and white paint, so it's kind of almost like a clown today. You could go and spot them quite easily. Obviously, it's not a good profession to be in. Now, this is also very controversial, is this last point here, that your textbook does talk about, and it's the relationship, which is what we call pederasty. Pederasty was a relationship between an adult male and a boy, usually about like 12 years old, going and hitting the time of puberty. And it involved the older man teaching the younger man what life was like as a Greek male. So he would teach him how to vote. He might teach him how to hunt. So it's kind of like a mentor. It did involve somewhat of a sexual relationship as well, which is kind of like the disturbing part to everybody. So that relationship sticks out to us. Homosexual behavior is very, very common in ancient Greece. It's just kind of a different standard of what we have today. We would probably say that this relationship between an adult male and a prepubescent or about a pubescent boy is not appropriate, but that's kind of the standard that they had at the time. Now, in the polis is the city-state, and as we talked about geography in one of the previous lectures, the importance of that. The polis is the city-state, and with this polis, they, like I said, they tend to have one deity, all this stuff. Sorry, that's a state. You might have heard of like Indianapolis or Annapolis or Metropolis. Polis means city. If you go to the polis, the agora is the marketplace. It's the downtown area where everybody goes and hangs out. That's where you could go, and if you sell something, you could rent out your stall basically from the state. You could sell your grain, your fish, or whatever. It's like their downtown most important place to go and hang out. You could bargain, you could socialize. It was where the courts were, all that stuff. Another important social aspect to the men specifically was a symposium. At the symposium, it's basically a drinking party where a bunch of men, you can tell a symposium because the men are usually in a reclined position on the couch, and it involves them going and drinking wine. They did not drink wine pure. It was watered down. Drinking wine, what we call pure, without being watered down, was considered barbaric at the time. They would eat, sing songs, dance. There may be entertainers, the jugglers, dancers, acrobats. They will go in and engage in intellectual conversation, depending between about 14, 15 to 30 guys, depending upon the size of the party. It was held in somebody's home. Like I said, they would go and drink wine. They would engage in crude jokes. The big old places where they store the wine are called the craters, with a K. And I have a funny quote here about that. This is a primary source. For sensible men, I prepare only 3 craters, one for health, one for love, and third for sleep. After the third one is drained, wise men go home. The 4th crater is not mine anymore. It belongs to bad behavior. The 5th is for shouting. The 6th is for rudeness. The 7th is for fights. The 8th is for breaking furniture. The 9th is for depression. And the 10th is for madness and unconsciousness. So the concept of you can drink, but you can't drink too much is a concept that they understood as well. Here's what's left of the agora in Athens. So you have to kind of use your imagination to think about what this would have looked like as a bustling marketplace. Now, everything that we just said about Greece, you have to put that aside now because Sparta has their own very, very unique culture. Now, Sparta is an inland city. It's not along the coast, and a lot of Greece is along the coast, as we've talked about before. Their economy is not the focus. The military is, and everything in Sparta is going to go and have to do with the military. They're very, very conservative compared to the rest of Greece as well. Now, the idea of Sparta has been a conflict between two people. There's the Spartans and there's the Helots, or the Helots. They are basically they're slaves, and they were treated absolutely brutally. They would go, and there's evidence that they were what we call dogskin caps. Basically, they would identify themselves, have to wear something around town. There was like duck hunting season, but it was helot hunting season, where Spartan boys basically would go and kill helots. They would get helots drunk in order to go show how bad drunkenness was and make fun of the people. And the helots were abused. The culture, everything is centered around military. Boys at the age of 7 are taken from their families and are basically going to be in the form of the army until they're about 60 years old. They're going to go and not be able to even get married until they're 30. They're going to live in army barracks with other guys. Basically, if they had a wife, a secret wife, they would be beaten, which is not good. They would eat communally as well. The boys, Spartan boys, when they're trained, they get no shoes and only one basically shirt per year. That's it. They underwent hazing. They exercised naked in all weather. They were underfed in order to encourage stealing, but at the same time, if they were caught, they would be beaten. There's kind of a legend, a story of a Spartan boy who stole a fox cub and hid it beneath his cloak. The cub began to basically eat the boy's insides, but rather than going in and saying that he had basically stolen it, he collapsed and died without making a sound. Now, women. Spartan women are not like the rest of women in ancient Greece. They physically trained naked. They were strong. The number one goal of a Spartan woman was to have a healthy Spartan male. They, like I said, these children, if they were deformed, they would go and kill them. They wouldn't take care of the babies. They would make fun of men who were unmarried, not making kids. Even some evidence that women had multiple partners because some of the Spartan men would die. A story of a mother whose son deserted the army, and she completely disowned him. When he came back, she said, "You are not my son." Also in the movie 300, you see the shield either come back with it or on top of it. So the idea was that you had to be committed to Sparta at all costs. Incredible commitment. The only way that you had a grave with your name on it was you either died in battle or you died during childbirth. So the men died in battle, or the women died during childbirth. And famous quote here: when the wife of King Leonidas was asked by a woman, "Why do you Spartan women rule over your husbands?" she answered them, "Because we are the mothers of men." So Greek society, tons of info there. A great option for one of your essays to go with the S there. So Greek society.